Alright, last lesson for this chapter is graphing linear and absolute value inequalities. The key thing here is that we are dealing with inequalities. Hopefully your graphing skill is up to speed. If not, it's going to cause you a few issues. Today's lesson is not going to focus so much on the graphing techniques as much as how the inequality symbol adds to our work. So again, I'm teaching the topic of inequalities, and then you got to apply it to what graphs we do. We've graphed the following inequalities before. We learned that y is greater than 6 means you put a 6 here. Because 6 is not greater than 6, it should be an open circle, and it should be pointing to the right. We've learned that when we do this, t is greater than 4, less than or equal to 4, that 4 is here. Because 4 is equal to 4, it means it's a closed circle because there's a line under it, and it's pointing to the left. M is less than negative 11. Again, negative 11 here. Because that's not got a line under it, it's an open circle. And again, you need a understanding of open versus closed circles. If you don't have that, you might want to get some more practice. Again, that's an Algebra 1 concept, and it's something that you just have to kind of work with. Write it down if you have to, that this means open, that means closed, but whatever you have to do, you need to memorize which one is open, which one's closed. These graphs have taught us to analyze whether the value is included or not included. When the value is included, again, we used a closed circle, like here. And when the value is not included, we used a open circle. The thing is, the same thing goes for graphing inequalities. The line will either be a closed line or a opened line. So again, in what we would call a open circle would look like this. So it would be an open line. A line that includes the numbers would be closed. Give me 1 second, I gotta get a ruler. And just like that, I'm back in a flash. Notice how the open line represents a line that exists but is not included with the solution. So again, the open line is there. Shading, in terms of shading, just make sure you keep in mind we shade where it is true. You also will need to understand how points on the coordinate plane work. Finally, you'll have to know how to check to see if a point is or is not a solution. Pretty much the easiest way to do it is to just get to it. Again, your graphing at this point should be mostly understood, at least. If not perfect, it should be almost there. So just be careful in terms of what you're doing there. When you go to graph y is greater than 3x minus 2, I ignore this symbol until the end and I graph this. Remember, this negative 2 means go down 2. This 3 means go up 3 over 1. And now what I have to do before I draw a line is ask myself, would this be an open or closed circle? From what I know, it would be an open circle, so therefore when you draw your line, make sure you draw what we call a opened line. And so it will look like that. That's the first part. We also have to deal with shading. The easiest point to test is 0, 0, because we have to actually test. We can't really go off of the direction of this part here. We have to actually just check to see whether the point we check is true or false. And so what we do now is when we test 0, 0, we plug 0 in for y, we plug 0 in for x, and we see if this is true or false. Is 0 bigger than a negative? Yes, it is. That means that this side is true. It means that everything on this side is true, because that's what this line does. It separates everything true from everything false, which means we would shade over here. And so that would be how you graph it. Alright? So again, the graphing itself is tough if you don't have that down yet, but the graphing shouldn't be the toughest part. The toughest part is make sure you use the proper line, make sure you test appropriately, and make sure you shade appropriately also. B, 4x plus 5y greater than or equal to 20. Again, ignore that for now and just work this out like anything else. And what we learned with standard form graphs is that we ignore the y. Notice I even write like it equals to get x is 5. So x is 5 goes here. I ignore the x to get x is 4. So y equals 4. Y is 4. Y is equal to 4. That should be a y. But again, that gives me my two intercepts. Now to draw a line, again, I look here and say this means it would be a closed circle. So therefore I draw what I consider to be a closed line. And from there I have to test a point, because again, I don't know what's true and what's false. The easiest point to test is 0, 0. So I will put a 0 in for x. I will put a 0 in for y. That will turn into 0 plus 0 greater than or equal to 20. Is 0 greater than or equal to 20? No, it is not. That is false, which means everything on this side, because remember, this separates everything true from everything that's false. It means everything over here is false, which means I don't want this side, because if everything on this side is false, that means everything on this side is what I'm looking for that will be true. All right. Sometimes you have different types of problems. Y is less than 2/3 x. This graph gave a lot of you problems. I won't say a lot, a few of you problems when you were doing your Math XL because you did not know where your first point was, but remember that is +0, which means your first dot is here. Then from there, because this is a y equals or slope-intercept, I go up to over 3. The last thing I do is say, would this be open or closed? That would be open. Therefore, I'm going to put a open line on this graph. This is curved the wrong way for some reason. The problem here, which you'll encounter on some of your graphs at some point in your higher levels of math, is that it goes through the point we want to test. You cannot test a point that's on the graph. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick a point on either here or here. Either this point or that point's better to test. Whenever 0, 0 is taken up, just pick one. Again, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and use this one. But you have to know that this is 1, 0. This is 0, 1. This is 1, 0. This means that x is 1, y is 0, which means when I go to test this point, I've got to turn my y into a 0 and my x into a 1, because that is the location I am testing. That turns into 0 is less than 2/3, and from what I know, that is true, which means that if that is true, everything on this side is true, and so it'll work. Just to show you what would happen if you checked this point, which should be false, that is 0, 1, which means y would be 1, x would be 0. That would mean that 1 is less than 0, which is false. And so again, if you were to test that point, you would find out that it was false, and you would know to go the other direction on that graph. Okay? So again, that's what happens whenever it goes through 0, 0. But everything else, like I said, is just a matter of making sure you remember what you did before. Here, I know this is going to be shaped like a V. Again, ignore this for now. I know this is going to be shaped like a V. I know it goes 1 down and 2 go the opposite left, with over 1, up 1, back 1, up 1. This, again, is where I have to figure out, is this an open or closed circle? So it would be closed, so I can draw my 2 lines as a closed line, which means there's one, and there's the other one. But again, because of this inequality, I actually have to shade, but notice 0, 0 is available. Now again, you have to know what you're doing here. You have to slow down. 0 means put a 0 in for y. 0 plus 2 minus 1. 0. That 0 plus 2 would turn to absolute value of 2 minus 1. 0. Absolute value of 2 is 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. Is 0 greater than 1? No, that is false. All these alarms. That is false, which means everything outside this V is false, so we would want to shade inside of the V. You're not going to get any other type of graph, I believe, than a absolute value graph, so for the most part, just make sure you're ready for that. I think. I don't know. I don't remember because I made your homework 2 weeks ago. But again, if anything happens, just email me, let me know. On this one, y is greater than x minus 1 plus 2. I know this is shaped like a V. I know it goes 2 up and 1 right because that is a -1. I know that it is over 1, up 1, back 1, up 1. That would be a open circle, right? So I want to draw open versions of lines, which means I want my line to have gaps. So it would be that type of line here. And the last thing I want to do is check. Again, the easiest point to check is always 0, 0. So 0 is greater than 0 minus 1 absolute plus 2. 0 is greater than, that would be -1 plus 2. The thing you got to remember is that the absolute value of 1 is 1 plus 2, which means that 0 is bigger than 3. That, as we know, is false. And so therefore, if that is false, it means everything on the outside is false. And once again, we want the opposite side of that because what we tested is wrong, so we go to the other side of the line to find our answer. Oh, this is going to be interesting. Actually, it won't be interesting. on this one, I was thinking ahead to the answer and I forgot what the graph is going to do. This one here is absolute value. It goes back one, down one and left one, which is why 0, 0 wouldn't work. I actually realized because it would be equal. This is a closed line, and so therefore over one, up one, there's my dot on accident. And again, a closed line to check here. And so again, you are now at a point where I cannot test 0, 0 because 0, 0 is part of the line. So I can either check, and usually it's going to be rare that both of these are taken, but I can usually check 0, 1 or 1, 0. I'm going to check 0, 1. I like doing this one for some reason because it puts a 0 in for y. So 0 less than or equal to 1 plus 1 minus 1. 0 less than or equal to absolute value of 2 minus 1. 0 less than or equal to 2 minus 1, which means that 0 is less than or equal to 1. That statement is true. And because that statement is true, it means everything out here is true. And so instead of going inside the V this time, we're going to stay outside. Overall, your graphing skill does not change. As long as you know how to graph, you will be fine on the first portion of work. But you must remember to identify the type of line and test a point. That's really what it comes down to in terms of your new information. Remember what type of line it is. Don't forget to test your point. And then practice, practice, and practice. Again, ask your questions. You should have a pre-test coming up tomorrow or tomorrow, Tuesday. Should be popping up, at least if you did this on Monday. And you do have to have, I think, a 90% on all your homework to get to it. So, like I said, it'll close on Friday. Just make sure you're ready to do what you need to do there. Good luck.